The foundation of respect is never built on intimidation, loud words, or displays of strength. Many people make the mistake of believing that if they push others around, if they raise their voice, if they force compliance, respect will naturally follow. They believe that by asserting dominance, by showing power, by controlling the external world, people will acknowledge them, honor them, admire them. But this is a false and fragile notion. Respect cannot be borrowed. It cannot be demanded. It cannot be stolen through aggression. True respect flows from the inside, from a place that cannot be shaken by external circumstances, a place that is cultivated, trained, and disciplined. It begins with self-mastery. Self-mastery means you control your impulses before they control you. It means your reactions are measured, intentional, and deliberate. It means your emotions do not dictate your behavior. Most people fail to command respect because they are ruled by their feelings. The surge of anger, the sting of insult, the fear of judgment. When someone criticizes them, they lash out. When someone challenges them, they shrink. When someone undermines them, they panic. This lack of internal control signals weakness. It signals that they are not yet the authors of their own mind. And when the mind is undisciplined, respect cannot follow. Self-mastery requires rigorous honesty with oneself. It requires recognizing your triggers, your weaknesses, and your blind spots. It demands that you examine your fears without flinching, without making excuses, without pretending they do not exist. It is uncomfortable. It is painstaking. It is relentless. But the discomfort is necessary. Without this inner clarity, any attempt to command respect externally is hollow. People can sense when someone is acting from insecurity, when their strength is performative rather than authentic. Inauthentic force is always transparent, no matter how loudly it is proclaimed, and it erodes trust, credibility, and influence. The first step towards self-mastery is observation. Observe yourself in moments of stress, in moments of confrontation, in moments of doubt. Watch how your emotions arise. Notice how your thoughts are influenced by fear, desire, or anger. Do not judge yourself. Simply observe. Awareness is the seed of control. You cannot master what you do not see. Only by knowing your own mind, its weaknesses and its strengths, can you begin to shape it, to guide it, to govern it. Next comes discipline. Self-mastery is not a fleeting state. It is a consistent practice. It is the repetition of small acts of control that accumulate into unshakable strength. Waking up at the same time each day, keeping promises to yourself, completing tasks before procrastinating, controlling your speech so it is precise and intentional. These are not trivial details. They are the practice fields where self-mastery is forged. When your actions align with your intentions, when your daily habits reflect your internal standards, your presence begins to carry weight. People sense it. They respect it. Discipline builds quiet confidence, and quiet confidence speaks louder than any shouted demand. Self-mastery also involves the mastery of attention. Most people scatter their focus, giving themselves to distractions, to social approval, to the constant pull of external validation. They are easily swayed by opinion, flustered by criticism, distracted by chaos. The self-mastered person chooses where to place their attention. They prioritize what matters, ignoring the trivial, sidestepping the unnecessary, and refusing to expend energy on matters outside their control. This selective focus communicates a deep, almost magnetic authority. People feel it without needing to articulate it. The presence of someone who has mastered their attention signals that their time, their energy, and their mind are not to be taken lightly. Another key dimension of self-mastery is emotional regulation. To command respect, you cannot allow fleeting emotions to dictate your behavior. Anger must be tempered with awareness. Frustration must be met with patience. Fear must be observed and acted upon strategically, not blindly. When someone insults you or challenges you, your response must come not from the heat of the moment, but from a place of measured thought. This is not suppression. This is alignment. It is the recognition that your internal state has value, and by controlling it, you demonstrate that you value yourself enough to not let the whims of circumstance or others define your behavior. Self-mastery also cultivates resilience. Life is relentless, filled with disappointments, betrayals, and obstacles. A person without mastery is at the mercy of these events, reacting impulsively, losing composure, and forfeiting respect. The self-mastered person, however, endures with calm and consistency. Challenges are not crises but opportunities to reinforce strength. Obstacles are not threats but mirrors reflecting areas to refine and improve. Resilience communicates power because it shows that your foundation is not built on external approval, but internal integrity. People respect those who cannot be shaken because strength that comes from within is rare and contagious. Finally, self-mastery teaches humility alongside strength. To be mastered is to know yourself fully, including your limitations, and to act with confidence without arrogance. True mastery does not need to prove itself. It does not posture or seek validation. It simply exists in alignment with its own standards. When someone possesses this quiet command, people instinctively defer. They listen, they follow, they respect, not because they are afraid, but because they recognize a force they cannot bargain with, a discipline that is undeniable, a clarity that is magnetic. Self-mastery is not easy. It is not glamorous. It is lonely at times. It requires confronting the parts of yourself that are messy, unruly, or uncomfortable. But it is the only pathway to respect that lasts. External force may yield temporary compliance, but self-mastery creates lasting authority. It transforms your presence, shapes the way others perceive you, and cultivates a power that cannot be borrowed, bought, or fabricated. Every decision you make, every habit you cultivate, every emotion you regulate builds the infrastructure of respect, solid, unshakable, and undeniable. In a world where everyone is shouting to be heard, where opinions are projected like weapons, where attention is chased like currency, silence carries a power that is rarely understood. Most people believe that to be respected, they must speak, must argue, must assert themselves constantly. They measure their value by how loudly they can push their ideas, how quickly they can respond, how aggressively they can defend their reputation. They crave recognition. They seek approval. They react to every provocation. And in the process, they reveal their weakness more clearly than any enemy ever could. The truth is, those who need to be validated are never truly in control. Their worth is dictated by external forces, by applause, agreement, acknowledgement, or fear from others. And as long as their energy is directed outward, their influence remains shallow. Loudness is often mistaken for strength, but it is the voice of insecurity, not mastery. Noise can attract attention, but attention is not respect. Validation seeking is fragile because it is conditional. It disappears the moment someone refuses to give it. Silence, however, speaks in a language that is deeper than words. It communicates confidence. It communicates independence. It communicates control. When you do not rush to explain yourself, when you do not scramble to justify your choices, when you do not inflate your actions to appear important, people feel the weight of your presence. They notice a kind of authority that is not earned by volume but by stillness. Silence signals that your value is inherent, not borrowed. It signals that your self-worth is not dependent on external agreement. To cultivate this silence, you must first detach from the constant need for validation. This means accepting that not everyone will approve of you. It means understanding that disagreement, criticism, or disinterest does not diminish your value. Most people panic when they encounter opposition because they have built their identity on others' opinions. They argue, they plead, they justify, all in desperate attempts to regain approval. But the self-mastered individual does not react to the world's approval. They react only to their own internal compass. Silence becomes their shield because they do not need the world to confirm what they already know. Silence also teaches patience. People who are loud and reactive often reveal their impatience through their speech, their gestures, their need to be right immediately. They cannot wait. They cannot observe. They cannot hold space. They speak before thinking, act before assessing, and in doing so, they reduce their authority. Silence, in contrast, creates a pause that allows observation. It allows discernment. When you remain quiet in tense situations, people reveal themselves. Their intentions, their weaknesses, their agendas become visible. By speaking less, you gain more insight. You gain clarity. You gain control. There is also an undeniable magnetism in restraint. People are drawn to those who are measured, who choose words deliberately, who do not offer validation freely because they understand its value. Silence cultivates mystery, and mystery cultivates respect. When someone does not reveal everything about themselves, when they do not overshare, when they do not seek constant reassurance, others instinctively pay attention. The mind works harder to understand them. The heart leans in. And in that quiet, deliberate space, influence grows effortlessly. Silence is not simply the absence of speech. It is an active strategy. It is discipline applied to communication. It is choosing when to contribute and when to withdraw. It is speaking only when it matters and allowing your presence, your gaze, your energy to communicate what words cannot. Loudness is often reactive, a defense mechanism, an attempt to reclaim control. Silence is proactive, a statement of inner strength, of authority rooted in self-mastery. Moreover, silence builds resilience. When you are not constantly seeking validation, when you do not need applause or agreement to feel worthy, external circumstances lose their power over you. Criticism does not wound you. Rejection does not unbalance you. Gossip does not distract you. You become like a mountain in a storm, unmoved, unshakable, silent, but undeniable. People notice this. They sense that your strength does not require their consent, and it draws respect automatically. Silence also sharpens your observation. When you are not consumed by the need to speak or react, you notice what others miss. You detect subtleties in behavior, shifts in tone, hidden agendas. You understand who seeks to manipulate, who seeks to dominate, who is honest, and who is false. This awareness allows you to respond strategically, with precision, rather than impulsively. The quiet observer wields influence effortlessly because their actions are calculated, deliberate, and impactful. In relationships, silence becomes an unspoken standard. People learn quickly that your approval is not freely given. They learn that your attention is valuable. They realize that they cannot manipulate or provoke you into overreacting. Boundaries are communicated without aggression, and authority is established without argument. This is the paradox of silence. The less you try to assert control, the more control you actually exert. Silence also communicates self-respect. When you are comfortable with quiet, when you do not need to fill every space with words, you demonstrate that your presence alone is sufficient. Others are forced to meet you on your terms. They must earn your engagement. And in doing so, they cannot help but respect you, because respect is always granted to those who command it without begging for it. Finally, silence allows the mind to remain free from distraction. The need for validation is a mental chain, a constant tether to the approval of others. Breaking this chain through silence gives you freedom. You can act with clarity, move with intention, and make decisions aligned with your values rather than the expectations of others. This mental freedom is a core component of self-mastery, and it is reflected outwardly in the respect people naturally give to those who are disciplined, deliberate, and unwavering in their inner authority. One of the most misunderstood truths about respect is that it is not given to those who try to please everyone. It is not earned by bending, accommodating, or sacrificing your own standards to make others comfortable. Respect is given to those who know their limits and enforce them consistently. Boundaries define your value because they communicate without words that your time, your energy, and your integrity are not negotiable. They signal to others that you are aware of your worth and that your presence is not cheap or disposable. Those who fail to set boundaries often find themselves drained, manipulated, and overlooked because when you allow others to cross your limits freely, you signal that you are negotiable. Boundaries are not walls. They are not rigid, inflexible barriers that isolate you from the world. Instead, they are a declaration of your self-respect. They say, I am aware of what I will accept and what I will not. I am aware of the energy I bring into the world, and I protect it fiercely. When you establish clear boundaries, people understand immediately that interacting with you requires effort, consideration, and respect. You are not asking for approval, you are communicating clarity. People instinctively respond to this clarity because the human mind unconsciously respects structure and consistency. Setting boundaries begins with self-awareness. You must know what drains you, what offends you, what compromises your integrity. Many people drift through life, allowing circumstances and other people's expectations to dictate their behavior. They say yes when they mean no. They overcommit, they tolerate disrespect, and they justify these choices with excuses or fear of conflict. This lack of boundaries is interpreted as weakness. It tells the world that your needs are secondary, that your comfort is optional, and that your principles are malleable. Without self-awareness, there can be no boundaries, and without boundaries, there can be no respect. Once you are aware of your limits, enforcing them becomes the next step. This does not require anger, confrontation, or dramatic displays of power. It requires calm, deliberate action. If someone crosses a line, you address it directly, without over-explaining, without guilt, and without seeking validation. A simple statement can be enough. I am not comfortable with that, or I do not allow this behavior toward me. Your voice does not need to be loud. Your presence communicates authority. The consistency with which you enforce these limits determines the degree of respect others accord you. Those who enforce boundaries sporadically or inconsistently are often ignored or tested because people sense the weakness behind hesitation. Boundaries also define your value by creating scarcity. When you are too available, too malleable, too eager to please, your energy is treated as expendable. But when you are selective, when your time, attention, and engagement are not given freely to every demand, your presence becomes more valuable. People naturally respect what is scarce. They learn that your approval and interaction are privileges, not rights. This is why high-value individuals command attention effortlessly. Their boundaries make them untouchable in subtle ways. Others may try to bypass or test these limits, but those who are disciplined in enforcing them remain unshakable, and this unshakable quality draws admiration and deference. Another aspect of boundaries is emotional regulation. Setting limits is not simply about physical space or time. It is about the emotional energy you allow others to impact within you. When you permit people to manipulate your emotions, to provoke you, or to demand validation, you signal that your internal state is disposable. Boundaries in emotion require self-mastery, the ability to remain calm, composed, and centered, even when others attempt to breach your limits. This is where respect is often won silently, not through words or actions, but through the demonstration that no one can unsettle your equilibrium without permission. Emotional boundaries communicate that you are in control of your inner world, and control commands respect. Boundaries also protect your priorities. People who lack boundaries often overextend themselves, sacrificing their time, energy, and goals to satisfy others. They react to every request, every demand, every interruption, and their own life becomes a reflection of others' expectations rather than their own purpose. By establishing clear limits, you prioritize what truly matters. You allocate your resources to projects, people, and experiences that align with your values. This selective engagement communicates competence and clarity. People respect those who are purposeful because purpose requires discipline, and discipline is magnetic. Furthermore, boundaries serve as a teaching mechanism. When you enforce them consistently, people learn what is acceptable and what is not. You do not need to lecture or threaten. Your actions are the instruction. The world adjusts to your standards. Those who try to manipulate, disrespect, or take advantage of you learn quickly that their behavior has consequences. Respect is cultivated when others understand that they cannot bypass your integrity without repercussion, and the consistency of your boundaries becomes a natural form of authority. Boundaries are also a reflection of self-value. When you tolerate disrespect, when you bend to every expectation, when you constantly seek approval, you devalue yourself silently. The world perceives what you permit. Conversely, when you establish limits, when you protect your time, energy, and dignity, you send a clear signal you are aware of your worth, and you refuse to compromise it. This awareness of self-worth resonates more powerfully than any words or actions designed to impress. It communicates authenticity, strength, and presence, qualities that draw respect effortlessly. Boundaries are not static, they evolve as you evolve. As you grow in self-awareness, as your priorities shift, as your understanding deepens, your limits naturally adjust. This flexibility does not weaken them, it strengthens them. It demonstrates that your boundaries are intentional, not reactive, and that they are aligned with your internal values rather than external pressures. People sense this alignment and they respect it because it reflects integrity. Ultimately, boundaries define your value because they create a framework within which your life operates. They determine how others interact with you, how your energy is spent, and how your presence is perceived. They communicate clarity, self-respect, and authority, often without a single word being spoken, and they are the invisible architecture upon which influence, power, and enduring respect are built. One of the most powerful yet overlooked qualities that commands respect and authority is not wealth, status, or even knowledge. It is emotional control. The ability to remain steady, composed, and deliberate in the midst of chaos is a force few possess and even fewer understand. People respond instinctively to emotional strength. It is magnetic. It is disarming. It is commanding. When you are not tossed around by every insult, every disappointment, every provocation, your presence speaks volumes. Without a word, you communicate power, stability, and inevitability. Emotional control is the unseen backbone of authority. Most people mistake outbursts, passion, or intensity for strength. They believe that if they react strongly, if they display their emotions openly, they will assert dominance, influence others, or gain respect. But the opposite is true. Those who cannot regulate their emotions are controlled by them. Their anger, fear, frustration, and desire dictate their actions, and others sense it immediately. Reactivity is a sign of vulnerability. It signals that the mind is unsettled, the presence is unstable, and authority is absent. Emotional chaos undermines influence. It is a silent weakness that people unconsciously detect and exploit. Emotional control, on the other hand, communicates mastery. When you can feel your emotions fully, acknowledge them internally, but choose your outward response intentionally, you demonstrate a strength that cannot be challenged. This does not mean suppressing or denying emotion. It means acknowledging it, processing it, and acting from a deliberate place rather than a reactive one. The person who masters this skill does not lash out when provoked. They do not collapse under pressure. They do not seek validation or reassurance to soothe internal turbulence. Their internal world is anchored, and that anchoring translates into authority in the external world. To cultivate emotional control, you must first observe yourself without judgment. Notice how your body reacts to stress, insult, or criticism. Observe the surge of adrenaline when you feel anger or fear. Notice the impulsive thoughts that demand immediate expression. Awareness is the first step because you cannot master what you do not see. By watching the emergence of emotion, by understanding its triggers and patterns, you gain the ability to interrupt automatic reactions. You create space between stimulus and response, and it is in this space that authority is born. The next step is discipline. Emotional control is not a state that appears overnight. It is built like a muscle through consistent practice. Small, deliberate acts, pausing before speaking, choosing calm over confrontation, breathing steadily when tension arises, accumulate into unshakable strength. Over time, what once triggered chaos now passes without disturbance. People around you begin to notice. They sense that you are unflappable. They sense that provoking you or manipulating your emotions is futile. This perception of stability elevates your authority. Emotional control is not performative. It is intrinsic. And intrinsic authority cannot be ignored or dismissed. Another critical aspect of emotional control is detachment from outcomes. Most people react because they are invested in how events unfold, in whether others approve of them, in whether their expectations are met. Emotional control requires stepping back from this attachment, understanding that your internal equilibrium is more valuable than immediate satisfaction or reaction. By prioritizing composure over impulse, by valuing the stability of your mind over temporary victories, you send a silent, powerful message. You are in command of yourself, and therefore, your environment responds to you rather than controlling you. Emotional control also enhances decision-making, which further reinforces authority. People who are ruled by impulses make mistakes, overreact, and undermine themselves. They act hastily, speak carelessly, and display instability that erodes confidence. The emotionally controlled individual, however, pauses to assess, evaluates objectively, and acts with clarity. Decisions are deliberate, precise, and impactful. Others notice this competence, and competence is inseparable from authority. When people sense that your actions are not dictated by volatility, they instinctively defer, follow, and respect your judgment. Moreover, emotional control fosters patience, another quality that creates invisible authority. Patience allows you to observe, to wait for the right moment, and to act strategically rather than reactively. Most people rush to respond, to prove themselves, to assert dominance through immediate action. But in impatience, their instability is revealed. The person who is patient, who remains calm while others fumble, communicates confidence, foresight, and strength. Silence in the face of provocation, waiting while others overreact, demonstrates authority without aggression. Emotional control also cultivates influence. People are drawn to those who are steady in stormy circumstances. They seek guidance, reassurance, and proximity. The more volatile the environment, the more your calmness is noticed. Your stability becomes a point of reference. Others naturally align with your pace and energy. Influence grows silently, effortlessly, and enduringly because it is grounded in authenticity rather than fear, coercion, or manipulation. In relationships, emotional control communicates boundaries. People respect those who do not allow their energy to be manipulated or exploited. Emotional stability is a clear signal that your time, attention, and engagement are valuable. You do not react to every provocation, you do not chase approval, and you do not tolerate unnecessary chaos. This self-regulation teaches others how to interact with you. Your authority is not claimed through intimidation. It is earned by demonstrating that you are unshakable, deliberate, and grounded. Finally, emotional control nurtures inner freedom, which reinforces outer authority. The less you are moved by anger, fear, or the need for validation, the more your actions reflect conscious choice rather than compulsion. This freedom is perceivable. Others sense that you are not trapped by circumstance or opinion, that your presence is autonomous, and that your mind cannot be swayed by triviality or drama. And in a world where most are reactive, needy, and easily manipulated, emotional control is a rarity. It commands attention, it commands trust, it commands respect. In a world obsessed with action, achievement, and outward display, very few understand the subtle power of presence. People measure success, influence, and respect by performance, by what is done, said, or achieved in visible ways. They believe that volume, speed, results, and accolades determine value. And while performance matters in certain contexts, it is nothing without presence. Presence is the quiet force that commands attention, draws respect, and creates authority without the need for constant demonstration. Presence communicates confidence, stability, and depth before a single word is spoken. Performance may impress momentarily, but presence resonates eternally. To understand presence, we must first recognize what it is not. Presence is not flashy gestures, loud words, or overcompensation. It is not measured by how often you prove yourself, how visibly you act, or how meticulously you curate an image. These are performances, temporary, conditional, and dependent on external validation. A person who relies solely on performance is constantly at the mercy of others' perception. One failure, one oversight, one misstep can diminish their perceived authority. Presence, however, is intrinsic. It emanates from the alignment of mind, body, and intention. It does not fluctuate with circumstance because it is rooted in internal mastery rather than external approval. True presence begins with self-awareness. The person who understands themselves, who knows their values, priorities, and principles, exudes an energy that others feel instinctively. This is not a learned technique or a manipulation of appearance. It is the natural consequence of self-alignment. When your inner world is calm, disciplined, and intentional, your outer world mirrors that energy. People sense it immediately. They do not need to know your accomplishments, titles, or credentials. They feel your stability. They notice your confidence. They respect the authority that arises effortlessly from your composure. Presence also demands stillness in a noisy world. Most people attempt to dominate through constant action and visible achievement. They fill every space with movement, chatter, and proof of effort. They perform because they fear invisibility. They act because they fear being underestimated. But the person who cultivates presence can afford to pause, to observe, to breathe, to remain grounded. Their stillness is not passivity, it is a statement. It signals that their value does not require validation through endless action. It signals that their confidence is quiet but unshakable. People are drawn to this stillness because it offers clarity and stability in the chaos. The way one carries their body is a reflection of presence. Posture, gait, eye contact, and the rhythm of movement communicate far more than words ever could. A person who moves with intention, who stands grounded, who holds their gaze without aggression, communicates authority without effort. Conversely, those who rush, fidget, or avoid eye contact signal instability, uncertainty, and weakness. Presence is physical as much as it is mental. It is the alignment of the inner state with the outer expression. It is the silent language that others unconsciously read and respond to. Another dimension of presence is emotional consistency. People who are ruled by their impulses, who swing between anger and excitement, fear and elation, are unpredictable. Their performance may be impressive at times, but it is unreliable. Presence arises when emotional stability becomes visible. When you remain calm under pressure, patient in tension, and composed in conflict, your energy communicates competence. Others naturally defer, follow, and trust someone who is stable because stability is rare and magnetic. Performance can impress, presence commands. Presence also transforms interactions. In conversation, in leadership, in negotiation, those who command presence do not need to dominate discussions. Their energy sets the tone. People instinctively match the energy of those around them. When your presence is strong, calm, and deliberate, it subtly directs attention and behavior. Others speak differently, listen more carefully, and measure their words around you. Influence is exerted not through arguments, persuasion, or demonstrations of skill, but through the weight of presence. This is why some people, despite doing little or appearing quiet, are inherently respected and followed. Their presence alone defines the room. Presence also communicates authenticity. When someone performs constantly, they are often seeking approval, validation, or recognition. This neediness is detectable and undermines authority. But the person grounded in presence does not seek validation. They act and speak from alignment with their values, not from the desire to impress. Authenticity is inherently magnetic because people are drawn to certainty and integrity. Presence is the signal of that integrity. Performance is conditional, presence is enduring. Presence also involves strategic restraint. It is not about silence for its own sake, but about knowing when to act and when to remain composed. The person who acts only when necessary conserves energy, attention, and influence. Every gesture, every word, every action carries weight. Others learn that interaction with such a person is meaningful, not trivial. This creates natural authority because people respect the discipline and intention behind measured action. Presence amplifies the impact of performance because performance without presence is often diluted, unnoticed, or forgotten. Furthermore, presence develops through detachment from external opinion. People obsessed with how they are perceived often overperform, seeking constant reassurance or recognition. This makes their energy reactive rather than proactive. Presence arises when you no longer need to prove yourself to anyone. When you detach from others' judgment, when your confidence is rooted in your internal compass rather than applause, your energy becomes magnetic. You no longer chase attention. Attention follows you. You no longer over-explain. Your aura communicates naturally. Presence, in its quiet strength, communicates authority, respect, and value effortlessly. Finally, presence allows for sustained influence. Performance is episodic. It peaks and fades. Presence is continuous. It is the invisible current beneath every interaction, shaping perception, commanding attention, and reinforcing respect. People respond to it instinctively, often without fully understanding why. Presence transforms ordinary interactions into subtle demonstrations of authority. It ensures that your influence, your respect, and your command are not fleeting, but enduring. One of the most overlooked keys to commanding respect, influence, and authority is the ability to detach from approval and anchor yourself instead in discipline. Most people live their lives seeking validation from friends, family, colleagues, and society at large. They adjust their behavior, opinions, and even their values to fit expectations. They chase praise, applause, and recognition as if their worth depends entirely on the perception of others. And in doing so, they surrender their power. True authority and self-respect are never granted by external validation. They are cultivated internally through discipline and consistency. When you stop asking the world for approval, when you stop reacting to judgment, and when you commit to a path of disciplined action, your presence becomes magnetic, your influence becomes tangible, and your value becomes undeniable. Detachment from approval begins with self-awareness. You must first recognize when your choices, emotions, or actions are being influenced by the need to be liked. This requires honesty. How often do you speak in ways that please others rather than reflect your true thoughts? How often do you act out of fear of judgment rather than conviction? How often do you compromise your boundaries to avoid conflict or criticism? Every time you let approval dictate your behavior, you give away power. You signal to the world that your value is conditional. And as long as value is conditional, respect remains fleeting. Detachment from approval is not rejection of social connection. It is liberation from the chains of dependence on others' perceptions. Once you cultivate detachment, discipline becomes your anchor. Discipline is the practice of aligning your actions with your values and goals consistently, regardless of external acknowledgement. It is the invisible force that shapes character, creates trust, and establishes authority. Discipline requires focus, patience, and intentionality. It is waking up each day and doing what must be done, not because someone is watching, not because someone will praise you, but because it is necessary for your growth, integrity, and purpose. Discipline is the framework within which respect is naturally earned, because people sense consistency, reliability, and internal strength. Attaching to discipline also transforms your mindset. When you prioritize discipline over approval, failure, criticism, and disapproval lose their power over you. You no longer act out of fear of embarrassment or judgment. You no longer overextend yourself to please others. Instead, your energy is devoted to mastery, growth, and deliberate action. This shift is subtle, but it is powerful. People instinctively notice when someone is internally motivated rather than externally validated. Influence grows not because you demand it, but because your disciplined presence communicates authority and self-respect without the need for words. Discipline also cultivates long-term vision. Approval is fleeting. Recognition today can be forgotten tomorrow. Praise is conditional. Discipline, on the other hand, builds foundations that endure. The person who commits to consistent action, daily practice, and steady improvement, regardless of external applause, accumulates strength, skill, and credibility that no temporary judgment can undermine. When you attach yourself to discipline, you are no longer subject to the volatility of others' opinions. Your focus shifts from immediate gratification to long-term mastery, and your presence reflects the weight of someone who operates with purpose rather than validation. Detachment from approval also fosters emotional stability. When you are not constantly seeking affirmation, you free yourself from the highs and lows that come with other people's responses. Praise no longer inflates you. Criticism no longer deflates you. Your inner equilibrium becomes untouchable. And when your emotional state is stable, your authority is unshakable. People respond instinctively to those who remain grounded because stability is rare and magnetic in a world of volatility. Discipline amplifies this stability because repeated, intentional action reinforces confidence and cultivates mastery over both internal and external environments. Furthermore, detachment allows you to act authentically. People can detect inauthenticity immediately, especially when it is masked by efforts to please or impress. When approval dictates behavior, authenticity is compromised. Words, gestures, and actions become performative, conditional, and unreliable. But when you detach from approval and act from discipline, your choices reflect your values, not external expectation. Authenticity resonates at a deep level. It builds trust, commands respect, and establishes a presence that cannot be fabricated or manipulated. People sense when someone's power comes from within, and they naturally align with that energy. Discipline also sharpens decision-making. When approval drives your choices, decisions are often reactive, influenced by the desire to impress, avoid conflict, or gain favor. Such decisions are inconsistent, uncertain, and vulnerable to external pressure. Detachment from approval allows decisions to be guided by principle rather than popularity. When paired with discipline, this creates predictable, reliable, and effective outcomes. People respect those whose actions are consistent and intentional because reliability signals competence, integrity, and control, all essential components of natural authority. Detachment from approval also fosters resilience. Life is filled with criticism, rejection, and misunderstanding. Those who depend on approval crumble in the face of disapproval. They become reactive, defensive, or desperate. The disciplined individual, detached from the need to be liked, navigates criticism with composure. They assess feedback without losing focus, act according to principle, and continue on their path regardless of external sentiment. This resilience is magnetic. People respect those who cannot be shaken by opinion because they are rare, disciplined, and unbound by the fleeting judgments of others. Finally, detachment from approval and attachment to discipline creates freedom. When you no longer need to seek validation, you are liberated to focus entirely on mastery, growth, and purpose. Your time, energy, and attention are yours. You are not reactive to every voice around you. You are proactive in creating your life according to your standards. This combination, freedom through detachment and power through discipline, is the ultimate foundation for commanding respect, influence, and authority